They say love is blind. Mine wasn't just blind. It was wearing a blindfold, earplugs, and humming loudly to drown out the warning bells. My name is Zara. Before I met Neil, my world was code, algorithms, and the thrill of watching my tech startup, Innovate Solutions, take off. I was young, driven, and honestly, a little naive about how old money really worked. I'd poured my heart and soul, not to mention countless sleepless nights, into building something from scratch, something that was mine. And it was thriving. I felt like I was on top of the world. Then Neil walked into my life, or rather, into a tech conference where I was a keynote speaker. He was, different. Or so I thought. He was charming, handsome in that effortlessly polished way, and he laughed at my nerdy jokes. He seemed genuinely impressed by my work, not intimidated by it. He came from a world of inherited wealth, a stark contrast to my self-made success, but he never made it seem like an issue. "You're brilliant, Zara," he'd say, his eyes shining with what I mistook for admiration. "You built something from nothing. That's incredible." For a while, it felt like a fairy tale. He was attentive, supportive, and for the first time, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't just about boardrooms and Series A funding. The first dinner at his family's sprawling estate, however, felt less like an introduction and more like an inspection. The house itself was magnificent, a testament to generations of accumulated wealth, but it felt cold, almost museum-like. His mother, Mallory, was a woman who wore her pearls like armor and her smile like a weapon. Her eyes, a pale, assessing blue, swept over me, lingering a little too long on my dress, my shoes, my simple jewelry. His father, Robert, was quieter, a portly man, with a permanently skeptical arch to his eyebrows. He offered a limp handshake and then retreated behind a facade of polite disinterest, though I felt his gaze on me throughout the evening. And Chelsea, Neil's sister, just watched. Mostly she picked at her food and offered monosyllabic answers when I tried to draw her into conversation. "So, Zara," Mallory began, her voice smooth as silk, but with an edge I couldn't ignore. She was seated at the head of a ridiculously long mahogany table. "Neil tells us you're quite the innovator." She drew out the word as if it tasted foreign, or perhaps a little common. I smiled, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel under her scrutiny. "I love what I do, yes. Innovate Solutions is my passion." "How quaint," she murmured, taking a delicate sip of her wine. "It must be so exciting, all this new technology, so different from, well, established businesses with history, with legacy." The implication was clear. My work was a fleeting trend, while theirs was eternal. "There's certainly a different kind of energy," I agreed, trying to keep my tone light. "Fast-paced, always evolving." "Challenging, yes," she mused, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her wine glass. "And I suppose some girls are just wonderfully ambitious these days, not content to just marry well." The dig was clear, a perfectly aimed dart. My cheeks burned. I glanced at Neil, hoping he'd say something, anything. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, offering a weak, apologetic smile in my direction, but remained silent. That silence was a punch to the gut. Robert chuckled softly. "Mallory, dear, you're embarrassing the girl." But there was no real reprimand in his voice, only a shared amusement. Chelsea actually looked up from her plate at that, a flicker of something, pity, in her eyes before she quickly looked away. The rest of the evening continued in a similar vein. Mallory's questions were relentless, disguised as polite interest, but designed to highlight my new money background against their established legacy. She asked about my parents, my upbringing, my education, each question a subtle probe for weaknesses, for signs that I wasn't their kind. She made comments about modern women and their interesting career choices, always with that slight, condescending smile. I parried as best I could, trying to remain poised, but inside I was seething. This wasn't a family welcome, it was a social vivisection. Later that week, after another perfectly pleasant dinner where Mallory managed to subtly insult my choice of wine, my understanding of art, and my rather bold business expansion plans, Neil walked me to my car. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his keys. "So," he started, avoiding my eyes, "Mom and Dad, they really like you, Zara? They do?" I raised an eyebrow. "They have a funny way of showing it." He winced. "They're just old-fashioned, protective. You know how it is." I didn't, actually. My family was loud, loving, and couldn't care less about someone's bank balance as long as they were a good person. "Anyway," he continued, finally looking at me, his expression pleading, they wanted to have a little chat with us about, the future and protecting the family assets. Just a formality, really, before the wedding. My stomach tightened. I knew this was coming. I'd read enough, heard enough stories. It wasn't a shock, but hearing it from Neil, after all his talk of my brilliance and independence, felt like a betrayal. "A chat?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Or an interrogation?" The little chat was, as I suspected, a full-blown ambush. We were ushered into Robert's study, a room paneled in dark wood, smelling of old books and even older money. Mallory sat behind a large mahogany desk that looked like it had witnessed generations of Harrison power plays. Robert stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, a silent, imposing sentinel. Neil hovered near the door, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mallory gestured to the two stiff-backed chairs in front of the desk. "Zara, dear, do sit down. Neil, you too." Her voice was all honey, but her eyes were pure steel. A thick document lay on the polished surface between us. "Now," she began, once we were seated, "as you know, Zara, our family has certain responsibilities, a legacy to protect. Robert and I, and indeed Neil, feel it's prudent to have certain agreements in place before you two embark on this wonderful journey together." She slid the document across the desk. "Just a formality, dear, to ensure everyone feels secure." Her eyes, however, didn't say secure. They screamed gold digger. I picked up the document. The legal jargon was dense, but the gist was brutally clear. In the event of a divorce, I would walk away with nothing. Not a penny of Harrison money, no claim to any assets acquired during the marriage, nothing. It was a comprehensive, ironclad disinheritance. My hands trembled slightly as I skimmed the pages. I could feel the blood draining from my face. This wasn't protection. This was a declaration of distrust, an insult wrapped in legalese. "This is—" I started, my voice barely a whisper. "Standard procedure for families like ours, Zara," Mallory interjected smoothly. "I'm sure you understand. It's not personal." Oh, it felt incredibly personal. It felt like every condescending remark, every dismissive glance, had been leading to this moment. I looked at Neil. His face was pale, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. "Neil?" He cleared his throat. "Zara, it's just what they want, to keep the peace. It doesn't mean anything about us, about how I feel." "Doesn't it?" I asked, my voice gaining a little strength. "It feels like it means quite a lot, actually." "Please, Zara," he mumbled, finally meeting my eyes, his filled with a desperate plea. "Just sign it. For me. For us. For them," he meant. My heart, which had soared with such hope when I met Neil, now felt like a lead weight in my chest. The hurt was a physical ache, sharp and deep. But beneath the hurt, a cold anger began to smolder. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was so desperate to marry into their precious family that I'd sign away my dignity. The next morning, I was in Ivy Weaver's office. Ivy, my lawyer, was a whirlwind of sharp intellect and even sharper suits. She'd been with me since Innovate Solutions was just a business plan scribbled on a napkin. She was more than a lawyer. She was a mentor and a friend. I slid the prenup across her desk. They want me to sign this. Ivy read it, her expression growing more thunderous with each page. By the time she finished, her lips were a thin, hard line. The unmitigated gall of these people, she finally said, her voice tight with outrage. This isn't a prenuptial agreement, Zara. This is a financial execution. They're treating you like a common grifter. Neil wants me to sign it to keep the peace, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Ivy snorted. Peace for whom exactly? Certainly not for you. She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her chin. All right. They want to play hardball? We can play hardball. A tiny spark of hope ignited within me. What do you mean? They're so focused on protecting their assets, Ivy said, a predatory glint in her eye. They've probably not even considered yours. Innovate Solutions is already worth a significant amount, and its growth potential is astronomical. We add a reciprocal clause, something simple, buried deep. It states that all your premarital assets, specifically naming Innovate Solutions, and all its future earnings, profits, and intellectual property remain solely and exclusively yours, untouchable by Neil or his family, regardless of circumstance. No community property, no commingling. Yours, period. Can we do that? I asked, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Oh, we can absolutely do that, Ivy said with a grim smile. They want to protect their legacy? Fine, you protect yours. She drafted the clause, a masterpiece of legal subtlety, and we strategically placed it within a dense section about asset disclosure. It looked innocuous, just another piece of boilerplate. A few days later, I sat once more in Robert's study, the revised document in front of me. Mallory watched me like a hawk, a smug little smile playing on her lips. Neil just looked relieved that this ordeal was almost over. I took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and signed their insulting prenup. I feigned reluctance, a hint of resignation. I even managed a watery smile for Neil. As I signed, I caught Mallory's triumphant glance. She thought she'd won, that she'd successfully caged the gold digger. I offered a small, tight smile back. She had no idea the real protection in that document was mine. The wedding was a lavish Harrison affair, exactly as you'd expect. Hundreds of guests I didn't know, oceans of champagne, and enough flowers to fill a botanical garden. I wore a beautiful dress, smiled for the cameras, and danced with my new husband. But through it all, I felt like an outsider, an actress playing a role. Mallory was in her element, gliding among her guests, the queen of her domain. Every time her gaze landed on me, I saw that same smugness. Little did she know, the game had just begun, and I was holding a trump card she hadn't even realized was in play. The years that followed our wedding were a study in contrasts. Innovate Solutions, my baby, exploded. We launched product after product that revolutionized our sector. We expanded globally. Our valuations soared into the billions. I was on magazine covers, speaking at international forums, living and breathing the exhilarating chaos of a company hitting its stride. I poured every ounce of my energy, my intellect, and my passion into it. It wasn't just a business. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I felt completely in control, completely myself. The success was sweet, a validation of my vision and hard work. Meanwhile, Harrison Holdings, the century-old manufacturing behemoth that was the source of Mallory's immense pride, began to show its age. Robert, who had inherited the CEO title rather than earned it, was resistant to change. He clung to outdated practices, dismissed new technologies, and seemed to believe the company's legacy alone would keep it afloat. The world was changing, but Harrison Holdings was stuck in the past, a lumbering dinosaur in a fast-paced ecosystem. The whispers started subtly, a missed earnings target here, a delayed product launch there. Nothing to cause alarm, not yet, but the cracks were beginning to appear. Mallory, of course, remained blissfully, or perhaps willfully, ignorant. At family dinners, which I still attended with a practiced smile, she'd make her usual subtle digs. It must be so volatile, Zara, your industry. Up one day, down the next. Not like good, solid manufacturing. Bricks and mortar, dear. That's what endures. I'd just nod. There's certainly a lot of movement, Mallory. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast, but she never seemed to notice. My marriage to Neil suffered. The more successful Innovate Solutions became, the more distant he seemed. He was proud, he said, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Resentment, perhaps? Or maybe it was the increasing stress from his own family's financial situation. He'd taken a senior role at Harrison Holdings, a position he was ill-suited for, and the pressure was clearly getting to him. He'd come home late, smelling of stale coffee and anxiety, his conversations increasingly peppered with complaints about market conditions and unfair competition. The lavish lifestyle the Harrisons were accustomed to didn't change, even as their company's fortunes dwindled. The parties were still extravagant, the shopping trips to Europe still frequent. But now there was a frantic edge to it all, a desperate clinging to the trappings of wealth. One evening, Neil was pacing our living room, a glass of scotch in his hand. He'd been quiet all through dinner, his brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" I asked, looking up from my laptop. I was reviewing quarterly projections for Innovate Solutions, and they were, frankly, spectacular. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, things at Holdings are a bit tight. Dad's stressed. We're looking at needing to modernize the main plant. It's going to require a significant capital injection." I nodded sympathetically. "That sounds like a big undertaking." He swirled the scotch in his glass, avoiding my gaze. "It is a very big undertaking." He paused, then said, almost too casually, "You know, Zara, Innovate Solutions is doing so incredibly well. You have so much liquidity." I waited. I knew where this was going. "Family helps family, right?" he continued, finally looking at me, a hopeful, almost desperate look in his eyes. "That's what families do." "Are you asking me for money, Neil?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He flinched. "Not asking, exactly. Just exploring options. Thinking aloud." I closed my laptop. "Innovate Solutions is a publicly traded company, Neil. I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders. We don't just hand out cash because someone in my extended family needs it." "But you're the majority shareholder," he protested. "You could make it happen." "It doesn't work that way," I said gently, though a cold knot was forming in my stomach. This was new territory. He'd never directly suggested I use my company's resources to bail out his family before. He drained his scotch and slammed the glass down on the coffee table a little too hard. "Right, of course, your company, your shareholders." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. A few weeks later, he tried a different tack. We were getting ready for bed. He sat on the edge of the mattress, fiddling with his watch. "Hypothetically, Zara," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "if Harrison Holdings needed a significant capital injection to, say, modernize, would Innovate Solutions consider an investment? As a strategic partner, perhaps?" I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of being treated like a gold-digging interloper, after being forced to sign a prenup designed to ensure I never saw a penny of their precious family money, now they wanted my company, my success, to save them from their own incompetence. "Hypothetically, Neil," I replied, my voice cool and calm. "Why would it?" He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't believe I'd even asked the question. The chasm between us, already wide, suddenly felt miles across. The hypothetical question hung in the air for days, unanswered and unaddressed. Neil didn't bring it up again, but the tension in our home was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Harrison Holdings imploded, not gradually, but spectacularly. It started with a new product line they'd rushed to market, some kind of smart home appliance that was anything but. Reports flooded in, malfunctions, safety hazards, even a couple of small fires, The media pounced. "Harrison Holdings fumbles tech debut," screamed one headline. "Century-old company cuts corners, endangers consumers," blared another. Their stock, already ailing, took a nosedive. It was a public relations nightmare, a textbook case of a company trying to innovate without understanding innovation, and worse, without prioritizing quality. The whispers in our social circles, the ones I usually attended with Neil, morphed into loud, concerned murmurs, then outright pitying glances. Mallory, who once held court like a queen, now looked strained, her smile brittle, her eyes darting around as if expecting criticism from every corner. Robert just looked older, grayer, the weight of his company's failure etched onto his face. One evening, Neil cornered me in my home office. He looked terrible, sleep-deprived, agitated, his usually immaculate clothes rumpled. "Zara, we need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm listening," I replied, turning from my monitor. "Harrison Holdings, it's bad, really bad, worse than anyone knows." He paced the small space, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. "The banks are calling in loans. Creditors are getting nervous. We need a substantial loan, just to tide us over, to stop the bleeding." "A loan?" I repeated, keeping my expression neutral. "Yes, from you, from Innovate Solutions. You have it, Zara. You have more than enough. It's just sitting there, all that excess capital." His eyes were wide, almost frantic. I took a slow breath. Here it was, the direct ask. No more hypotheticals, no more vague suggestions about family helping family. This was desperation. "Neil," I said, my voice calm and steady, "you know my answer to this. Innovate Solutions is not a piggy bank for Harrison Holdings. And as for my personal finances," I paused, letting the unspoken hang in the air. "Our finances are separate. Your family made that abundantly clear before we even got married, remember?" His face flushed a dark red. "Are you serious? You're going to bring that up now? My family is on the verge of losing everything, and you're going to hold a grudge over a piece of paper?" "It wasn't just a piece of paper, Neil," I said, my voice hardening. "It was a statement, a very clear statement about how your family viewed me, about my worth in their eyes, and I respected their wishes. Our finances are separate." "But we're married!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Doesn't that mean anything to you? For God's sake, Zara, this is my family's legacy. My father is devastated." "And I'm supposed to sacrifice my company's stability, my shareholders' trust, because your father mismanaged his legacy into the ground?" I stood up, facing him directly. "No, Neil, I won't do it." He stared at me, his chest heaving, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You're cold, Zara. You know that? Unbelievably cold. I can't believe you're doing this." He stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the silent house. I sank back into my chair, my hands shaking slightly. It wasn't easy saying no. A part of me, the part that had once loved him, felt a pang of something akin to pity. But the larger part, the part that remembered Mallory's smug smile as I signed that prenup, felt a grim sort of resolve. The tension in our home became unbearable. We barely spoke. We slept in the same bed, miles apart. He looked at me with open resentment, and I looked at him and saw a stranger, a weak man who had stood by and let his family humiliate me, and who now expected me to clean up their mess. Later that week, I was walking past the guest room, which Neil had started using as a makeshift office, to make frantic phone calls. The door was slightly ajar. I heard his voice, low and urgent, then Mallory's, sharp and strained even through the phone. "She refused, Mother! Flat out refused!" Neil was saying, his voice tight with anger and desperation. "Can you believe it? All that money and she won't lift a finger? The gold digger is holding on to her gold." My blood ran cold. So that's what I still was to them, even now, even when they were begging for my help. The gold digger. A grim sense of purpose settled in. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about respect. And they were about to learn a very hard lesson about who they had underestimated. The Harrisons started bleeding assets. First, it was the charming summer cottage in the Hamptons, sold quietly, discreetly. Then, a few notable pieces from their extensive art collection appeared at auction. The society pages, once filled with photos of Mallory at glittering galas, now ran speculative pieces about the financial headwinds facing Harrison Holdings. You could almost taste their desperation in the air. Chelsea Neal's sister was dispatched next. She called me, her voice thick with unshed tears, and asked to meet for coffee. I agreed, curious. We met at a quiet cafe. Chelsea, who usually radiated an air of bored entitlement, looked genuinely distressed. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her designer outfit looking a little less pristine than usual. "Zara," she began, her voice trembling, "I know things have been difficult between you and the family, and with Neal." I sipped my latte, waiting. "But this is our legacy, Zara. Harrison Holdings. It's been in our family for generations. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, they built it from nothing." She conveniently forgot to mention that I had also built something from nothing, something they now desperately needed. "It's not just about Mom and Dad," she continued, tears welling in her eyes. "It's about the future, my children, Neal's future children. Don't you want your children to be part of that legacy?" The audacity of it, using hypothetical, non-existent children to guilt-trip me. "Chelsea," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "my finances are separate from Neal's and from your family's. That was made very clear a long time ago." "But this is different," she pleaded, her voice rising. "This is an emergency. You have the means to help. You could save us. Please, Zara, for the sake of the family. For Neal." "Neal made his choices, Chelsea, and your parents made theirs." I placed my cup down. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, truly, but I can't help you." She stared at me, her face crumpling. The tears finally spilled over. "I don't understand how you can be so heartless." She grabbed her purse and fled the cafe, leaving me to pay the bill. Heartless, or just unwilling to be a doormat anymore? Neal's pressure, meanwhile, escalated from accusatory to outright demanding. He stopped yelling and started pleading, then cajoling, then issuing veiled threats. "Zara, you have to understand," he said one night, following me into the kitchen as I made myself a cup of tea. "If Holdings goes under, we lose everything. The house, everything. Dad, I don't think he'll survive it. Mom is beside herself." "And this is my responsibility how, Neal?" I asked, not turning around. "Because you're my wife," he exclaimed, his voice cracking. "Because you have the power to stop this. You could use your Innovate Solutions shares as collateral, just a small portion, enough to secure a loan for my family, for us." I finally turned, tea forgotten. "My shares? You want me to leverage my company, the company I built, the company your mother accused me of using to trap you, to bail out your family's failing business?" "It's not like that," he insisted, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. "It's a temporary measure. We'll pay it back, with interest." "No, Neal." His face hardened. "You're really going to let them go down? After everything?" "After everything they put me through, you mean?" I shot back. "Yes, I think I am. The final straw, the one that severed any lingering thread of loyalty or affection I might have felt for Neal, came a few days later. Quinn, my business partner and closest friend, called me into her office. She looked grim. "Zara, you need to see this," she said, turning her monitor towards me. It was an email chain. My blood ran cold as I read. Neal had secretly approached one of Innovate Solutions' key investors, a man I'd known and trusted for years. He'd used my name, implying I was fully on board, and tried to leverage my reputation to secure a massive personal loan for Harrison Holdings. He'd painted a picture of me being supportive, of this being a joint spousal effort to save his family's business. He'd lied, blatantly. He'd tried to go behind my back and use my success, my credibility, to fund their sinking ship. The betrayal was a physical blow. It wasn't just about money anymore. This was about trust, about integrity, and he had just torched it all. He what? I whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. The investor called me, Quinn said, her voice tight with anger. He smelled a rat, wanted to confirm with you directly before even considering it. Good thing he did. I felt a wave of nausea. This man, my husband, was actively trying to undermine me, to use me, to deceive people I respected. That evening, Neil confronted me, his face pale, his eyes haunted. He must have heard the investor had contacted me. My parents are on the brink of losing everything, Zara. Everything! His voice was desperate, pleading. The lawyers are talking about bankruptcy. If you don't help us now, our marriage, I don't see how it survives this. Was that a threat or a plea? I looked at him, at the man I had once loved, the man who now stood before me, a desperate, deceitful stranger. And for the first time I realized I truly didn't care anymore. The last embers of affection had been extinguished by his treachery. Is that so? I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Let it crumble. Let it all burn. The air in our ridiculously oversized living room crackled. Neil stood there, his ultimatum hanging between us like a guillotine blade. Our marriage. I don't see how it survives this. I looked at him, really looked at him. The charming man I'd fallen for was gone, replaced by this hollow-eyed, desperate stranger who reeked of his family's impending doom and his own moral bankruptcy. The discovery of his clandestine attempt to swindle my investor using my name had been the final, decisive blow. Any lingering sentimentality, any shred of doubt about my course of action had evaporated. Let me get this straight, Neil, I began, my voice dangerously calm. You go behind my back, you lie to one of my most important business associates, you try to leverage my company and my reputation without my knowledge or consent, effectively attempting to defraud him, and then you have the audacity to issue me an ultimatum about our marriage. He flinched, color rising in his pale cheeks. I was desperate, Zara. You weren't listening. I had to do something. Something deceitful? Something that could have irrevocably damaged my professional standing? I shook my head, a humorless laugh escaping me. You know, for years, your mother painted me as the calculating one, the gold digger. Turns out, the real schemer in this family wasn't me. That's not fair, he protested weakly. I was trying to save my family by sacrificing my integrity, by potentially dragging my company into your family's mess. I walked closer to him, my gaze unwavering. Your family made their bed, Neil. They were arrogant, short-sighted, and frankly, terrible at business. And you? You stood by and let them treat me like dirt, then expected me to clean up the mess when their empire started to crumble. You didn't defend me then, and you're certainly not defending me now. You're just trying to use me. His shoulders slumped. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. So that's it then? You're just going to watch them burn? They lit the match, Neil, I said softly. I'm just choosing not to be the fire department. The argument, if you could even call it that, was explosive in its finality. There were no more tears, no more pleading from him. Just a vast, empty silence that confirmed everything was, indeed, over between us. He retreated, defeated, and I felt nothing. Just a cold, clear sense of purpose. The next day my phone rang. Caller ID, Mallory. I let it ring a few times before answering, taking a moment to compose myself, to steel my resolve. This was it, the summons. Zara, dear, her voice cooed, a syrupy concoction of false concern and thinly veiled command. It was the same tone she'd used when presenting the prenup, the one that dripped with condescension while pretending benevolence. How are you? I'm fine, Mallory, I replied, my voice even, betraying nothing. And you? A delicate sigh traveled down the line. Oh, Zara, things are difficult, as I'm sure Neil has told you. A pause, clearly expecting me to fill it with sympathetic noises. I remained silent. Robert and I, she continued, her voice taking on a slightly more urgent edge, we feel it's time we all sat down, as a family. There are things we need to discuss, important things. We'd like you and Neil to come to the house this evening. It's urgent. As a family. The irony was almost laughable. We were never a family. I was always the outsider, the tolerated appendage, the one they were waiting to expose as unworthy. A cold anticipation filled me. This wasn't just a discussion. This was their last stand. This was the moment they would officially, formally, grovel. After years of their thinly veiled insults, their smug superiority, their blatant disdain, they were finally going to have to ask me, Zara, the gold digger, to save them. The thought sent a shiver, not of fear, but of something akin to exhilaration, down my spine. I had waited for this moment, consciously or unconsciously, for years. Every slight, every condescending remark, every dismissive glance, it had all been leading here. Of course, Mallory, I replied, my voice smooth as glass. What time? 7 o'clock, dear. And Zara? Yes? Thank you. It means a great deal to us. Her voice was laced with a humility I'd never heard from her before. It was almost convincing. Almost. I hung up the phone, a slow, knowing smile spreading across my face. The game was set. The pieces were in place, and I knew exactly how I was going to play my winning hand. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, me and Quinn, laughing, at the Innovate Solutions IPO celebration. They thought they could break me, diminish me. They had no idea what they had truly unleashed. Tonight, the Harrisons would learn the true price of their pride, and I would savor every single moment of it. I arrived at the Harrison estate at precisely 7. The grand, imposing facade, usually so intimidating with its aura of old money and unshakable power, now seemed diminished. The manicured lawns were just a little less perfect. A few lights in the sprawling mansion were dark, and an almost palpable air of decay hung in the evening air. It was subtle, but I noticed. A grim-faced housekeeper, one I vaguely recognized from years of stilted holiday dinners, showed me into the formal drawing room. Mallory, Robert, and a hollow-eyed, utterly defeated-looking Neil were waiting. The room, usually so opulent and filled with the murmur of polite society, felt like a tomb. The silence was heavy, thick with unspoken fear and desperation. Mallory, ever the gracious hostess, even on the precipice of ruin, gestured towards a silk brocade armchair. "Zara, dear, thank you for coming." Her voice was strained, the usual imperious tone replaced by a forced, fragile warmth. Robert merely nodded, his face ashen. Neil wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat, placing my clutch purse deliberately on the small antique table beside me. I felt remarkably calm, a chillingly serene spectator at their impending implosion. They launched into it, a carefully rehearsed, yet utterly transparent performance. Mallory went first, her voice trembling slightly. "Zara, Robert and I, we know there have been misunderstandings in the past. Perhaps we haven't always appreciated you, your strengths, as we should have." Misunderstandings? That was a new one. Robert cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "What Mallory is trying to say, Zara, is that we may have misjudged you in the early days." He actually looked pained to admit it. Neil remained silent, staring at his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Then came the appeals, laced with feigned remorse and a heavy dose of desperation. They spoke of family duty, of shared history, conveniently forgetting how they'd tried to exclude me from theirs, and of the devastating impact the collapse of Harrison Holdings would have on so many innocent people, their employees, their legacy, Their social standing? Mallory leaned forward, her eyes, usually so sharp and assessing, now wide and pleading. Zara, we need your help. Harrison Holdings needs a significant infusion of capital to survive, a bailout, if you will. She named a figure, a staggering multi-million-dollar sum that would barely make a dent in Innovate Solutions' quarterly profits, but would be everything to them. If you provide this investment, she continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency, Robert and I are prepared to offer you a meaningful role in a revitalized Harrison Holdings, a seat on the board, perhaps even an executive position. You have such a keen business mind, Zara. We see that now. A meaningful role? After years of being treated like an unwelcome interloper? The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of it almost made me laugh out loud. I let them talk. I listened patiently, my expression carefully neutral, as they exhausted their arguments, their pleas, their pathetic attempts at flattery. I let the silence stretch after Mallory's desperate offer, watching the hope drain from her face with each passing second. Then I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. Misunderstandings, I began, my voice soft, yet carrying clearly in the tense room. That's a rather delicate way of putting it, Mallory. I leaned forward slightly. Let me recount a few of these misunderstandings, shall I? I remember being told how quaint my ambitions were. I remember the subtle and not so subtle digs about women who marry up. I remember being scrutinized, judged, and found wanting at every turn. And I distinctly remember being presented with a prenuptial agreement designed to ensure that if my marriage to your son failed, I would walk away with absolutely nothing. Because in your eyes, I was, and I quote Neil from a recent phone call with you, Mallory, a gold digger. Mallory's face, which had been a mask of desperate hope, began to contort, first with disbelief, then with a dawning, horrified understanding. Robert stared, aghast, his mouth slightly open. Neil finally looked up, his face a mask of utter devastation, as if the full weight of his family's hubris and his own spinelessness was crashing down on him all at once. You were so very careful to protect your assets from me, I continued, my voice still calm, but with an undeniable edge of steel. So focused on ensuring the gold digger didn't get her hands on your precious family money. But you see, Mallory, Robert, you overlooked one small detail. I paused, savoring the moment. My lawyer, Ivy, is a very thorough woman. She insisted on a reciprocal clause in our prenup, a tiny little paragraph buried deep in all that legal jargon you were so proud of. It states, quite clearly, that all my premarital assets, specifically Innovate Solutions, and all its future earnings, profits, and intellectual property remain solely and exclusively mine, untouchable by Neil, untouchable by his family, regardless of circumstance. I let that sink in. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Mallory's ragged breathing. So, to answer your request, I said, my smile widening just a fraction. No, I won't give you a dime, not one single penny. Mallory's face crumpled. The carefully constructed facade of the proud matriarch shattered, revealing the terrified, desperate woman beneath. Fury warred with despair on her features. Robert looked like he'd been physically struck. Neil just looked broken, utterly and completely. You see, Mallory, I said, standing slowly, picking up my clutch. The only legacy I was ever interested in protecting was my own, and I've done that quite successfully. I paused at the door, turning back to deliver the final, crushing blow. And speaking of legacies, Innovate Solutions is currently in talks to acquire a certain struggling manufacturing company. Its assets are going for a song. Apparently, the current owners mismanaged it into the ground. Their faces, already pale, drained of all remaining color. The unspoken name of Harrison Holdings hung in the air between us, a death knell. I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their fallen empire. The silence that followed me down the grand staircase was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Within weeks, Harrison Holdings, unable to secure any further credit or find a white knight investor, declared bankruptcy. The news blazed across financial headlines, a cautionary tale of old money arrogance meeting new world realities. The estate, that monument to their perceived invincibility, went on the auction block. The society pages, once filled with their triumphs, now feasted on their downfall, dissecting every misstep, every desperate measure. And of course, the delicious gossip of my refusal to bail them out, the gold digger, who turned out to have all the gold, was the juiciest tidbit of all. Neil, caught in the crossfire between his ruined, furious family and the wife he had so spectacularly betrayed, tried to bridge the unbridgeable gap. He showed up at my apartment. I'd moved out of our marital home the day after the confrontation, looking even more haggard and lost than before. "Zara," he began, his voice a hoarse whisper, I'm sorry. For everything. For not standing up for you. For what I tried to do with your investor. It was a pathetic apology. Too little. Far too late." The words felt hollow, extracted by desperation rather than genuine remorse. "Are you sorry, Neil?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe, not inviting him in. "Or are you just sorry you got caught, and sorry that your family's gravy train has derailed?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I countered. "You stood by for years while your mother insulted me. You practically begged me to sign that prenup. You called me a gold digger behind my back. And then, when your family's incompetence finally caught up with them, you tried to manipulate me and my business to save them. So tell me, Neil, what part of this isn't fair?" He had no answer. He just stared at the floor, a broken man. I didn't wait for one. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion save a weary finality. "The prenup your mother was so keen on will make it a very clean break. You get nothing from me, as was always her intention for me, ironically." He looked up then, a flicker of something, panic, in his eyes. "Zara, please." "Goodbye, Neil," I said, and gently closed the door. I heard later that his parents, blaming him for failing to secure my bailout, had effectively disowned him. He was left with nothing, no family fortune, no wife, no career to speak of. Just the bitter taste of consequences. The days that followed were quiet. There was a profound sense of release, like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The drama, the constant undercurrent of disapproval and manipulation that had defined my marriage, was gone. Innovate Solutions continued its upward trajectory, a testament to actual innovation and sound management. We did, in fact, acquire some of Harrison Holdings' more viable assets out of bankruptcy, at a steep discount, of course. It was a purely strategic business decision, but I won't deny the small, cold sliver of satisfaction it brought. Quinn, my ever-loyal partner and friend, had been my rock through it all. One evening, not long after the dust had truly settled, we were on the rooftop terrace of our new corporate headquarters, overlooking the glittering city skyline. We were celebrating another record-breaking quarter. She raised her champagne flute. "To karma," she said, her eyes twinkling, "and to exceptionally well-drafted legal documents." I clinked my glass against hers, a genuine smile, light and unburdened, spreading across my face. "I'll drink to that." "You know," she said, looking out at the sprawling metropolis, "they really did a number on you, or tried to." "They did," I acknowledged, sipping the champagne. It tasted like victory. "They underestimated me. They saw a young woman, successful, yes, but in their eyes, still someone they could control, someone whose worth was measured by who she married, not by what she built." "Their mistake," Quinn said firmly. "Their biggest," I agreed. The pain they had inflicted, the years of subtle humiliations and outright disrespect, hadn't vanished, but it no longer held power over me. It had been transmuted into something else: resolve, strength, and an unshakable belief in my own value. It wasn't just about the money, you know, I said, more to myself than to Quinn. It was about respect. It was about them finally seeing me, not as an accessory or a target, but as a force to be reckoned with. Quinn nodded. And they saw it. Boy, did they see it? The look on Mallory's face when you told her about that reciprocal clause? Priceless. I laughed, a real hearty laugh. It was, wasn't it? We stood there for a while, watching the city lights twinkle to life. They had tried to break me, to make me small, to fit me into their narrow gilded cage. Instead, they had forged me into the woman who would not only survive their machinations, but would ultimately watch them fall, brought down by their own arrogance and greed. The revenge, cold and precisely executed, wasn't just satisfying, it was a reclamation of my power, my dignity. And that, I thought, looking out at the city that felt like mine, truly mine, was indeed priceless.
The Martinez family mansion had always felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Even as a child, visiting my grandparents for mandatory Sunday dinners, I'd find myself pausing in certain hallways, overcome by déjà vu. The curve of the grand staircase, the way sunlight fell through the stained glass windows in the library, the peculiar echo of footsteps in the east wing. It all resonated with something deep in my memory. Elena, stop dawdling. Grandmother would snap, catching me running my fingers along the mahogany wainscoting. A lady doesn't touch the walls. But I couldn't help it. The house called to me, like it held secrets I was meant to discover. Now, at 35, standing in that same foyer with my adopted son Michael's hand in mine, I finally understood why. Mrs. Harrison, the housekeeper's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Your grandparents are waiting in the study. I squeezed Michael's hand reassuringly. At 6 years old, he was already too perceptive, picking up on the tension thrumming through the house. It's okay, Mio, I whispered. Remember what we talked about? He nodded solemnly, his dark eyes serious beneath his unruly curls. Best behavior. No whining. No touching anything. That's right. This won't take long. But as we approached the study, I knew I was lying to myself. This conversation had been brewing for months, ever since I'd announced my decision to adopt Michael. My grandparents' reaction had been predictably cold. A Mexican orphan, grandmother had said during that first phone call, her voice dripping with disdain. Really, Elena, if you're so desperate for a child, we could have arranged a proper adoption. There are agencies that specialize in better backgrounds. I'd ended that call abruptly, but the comments kept coming. Subtle digs during family events, pointed remarks about bloodlines and heritage, casual mentions of other potential heirs who had real claims to the Martinez fortune. The study door swung open, revealing my grandparents in their usual positions. Grandfather behind his massive desk, grandmother perched on the antique settee by the window. They looked like aristocrats from another era, which I suppose they were, in their minds at least. Elena, grandfather's voice was clipped. Punctual as always. His eyes fell on Michael, narrowing slightly. I see you brought the boy. Michael, I corrected firmly. Your great-grandson's name is Michael. Please sit. Grandmother gestured to the leather chairs facing the desk. Maria, bring us tea, and perhaps some juice for the child. Michael climbed into one of the oversized chairs, his feet dangling above the Persian carpet. He looked so small in that imposing room, surrounded by oil paintings of stern-faced Martinez ancestors. But his spine was straight, his expression composed. Pride swelled in my chest. My son might not have their blood, but he had more dignity in his little finger than they had in their entire bodies. We've asked you here today, grandfather began, shuffling through papers on his desk, to discuss a matter of some delicacy. As you know, your father's passing last year significantly altered the family's succession plans. My father's death had been unexpected. A heart attack at 58. We hadn't been close, his dedication to the family business leaving little time for actual family, but his death had still left a hole in my life. More significantly, it had left a hole in the Martinez family hierarchy. As an only child, I was suddenly next in line for everything: the business, the properties, the responsibility of carrying on the family name. The Martinez legacy spans 6 generations, grandmother added, accepting a teacup from Maria. 6 generations of careful marriages, strategic alliances, and proper breeding. Surely you understand why we have concerns about your recent decisions. If you mean my decision to adopt Michael, I said evenly, I don't see how that affects anything. He's my son, legally and in every way that matters. But he's not a Martinez. Grandfather's voice was sharp. Not really. The family trust is quite specific about bloodlines and inheritance. We've had our lawyers review everything, and they agree. Adopted children have no claim to the primary estate. I felt Michael stiffen beside me. Though young, he was old enough to understand rejection when he heard it. I placed a protective hand on his shoulder. That's fascinating, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Especially since I distinctly remember you telling me that family was about more than blood when you took me in after my mother disappeared. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grandmother's teacup clattered against its saucer. Grandfather's face went through several interesting color changes. That was different, he sputtered. Was it? Because I've been thinking a lot about that lately. About how quickly you stepped in to raise me when Mom vanished. About how you never seemed to look for her, never filed a missing persons report. About how familiar this house has always felt. Elena, Grandmother's voice held a warning. Some things are better left in the past. But I wasn't finished. I hired a private investigator last month. Would you like to know what he found? Grandfather stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This meeting is over. Take the boy and go. His name is Michael, I said again, standing as well. And we're not going anywhere until we discuss the DNA test results I received yesterday. The color drained from Grandmother's face. Grandfather gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. In the heavy silence, I could hear the antique clock ticking on the mantel, marking seconds that felt like hours. What DNA test? Grandmother finally whispered. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. It's interesting, isn't it? How much family secrets can cost. How much people will pay to keep them buried. But you know what's even more interesting? I placed the envelope on Grandfather's desk. How much truth can reveal itself through simple genetics? Mammy? Michael's voice was small, uncertain. Can we go home now? Soon, Mio, I promised, not taking my eyes off my grandparents. First, we need to hear a story. A story about a young maid who worked in this house 29 years ago. A maid who caught the attention of the family's only son. A maid who disappeared shortly after giving birth to a baby girl. Grandmother's teacup slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the study like a gunshot. Her name was Isabella Ramirez. I continued, my voice steady despite the thunder of my heart. She was 16 when she started working here, 17 when she caught my father's eye, 18 when she disappeared. You have no proof. Grandfather's voice was hoarse. These are wild accusations. I opened the envelope, spreading its contents across his desk. Birth records from St. Mary's Hospital. Police reports that were mysteriously never filed. Bank transfers to an account in Mexico. And DNA results showing that Isabella Ramirez was my biological mother. Michael watched wide-eyed as papers scattered across the polished mahogany. He might not understand everything happening, but he knew this moment was important. What did you do to her? I asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted me for decades. Grandmother stood shakily, smoothing her silk dress with trembling hands. We did what was necessary. For the family. For you. For me? I laughed bitterly. You sent my mother away, erased her existence, and raised me as your granddaughter. All for me. Your father was engaged to Margaret Wellington. Grandfather snapped. The merger between our companies would have secured the Martinez empire for generations. We couldn't let some maid's indiscretion ruin everything. Indiscretion? The word tasted like poison. I was a baby, a human being, not some scandal to be covered up. We give you everything, Grandmother insisted. The best schools, the finest clothes, a place in society. If people had known the truth. If people had known the truth? What? That the great Martinez family wasn't as pure as they pretended. That your precious son got a teenage maid pregnant and you paid to make her disappear. Grandfather slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. We paid her well. Set her up with a new life in Mexico. She agreed never to contact you. Did she agree, or did you threaten her? The silence that followed was answer enough. How much? How much did my mother's silence cost? $50,000, grandmother whispered, and a promise that you would be cared for. The number hit me like a physical blow. $50,000. That's what they thought a mother's love was worth. That's what they paid to steal my heritage, my identity, my truth. And now you have the audacity to tell me my son isn't real family? I pulled Michael close to me. That he doesn't deserve to inherit because he's adopted. Because he's Mexican. That's different, grandfather began. But I cut him off. No, it's exactly the same. You're still trying to control who belongs in this family based on your twisted ideas of blood and status. Well, guess what? By your own logic, I'm not a real Martinez either. I'm the daughter of a Mexican maid you paid to disappear. But you're still blood, grandmother protested. Still our great-granddaughter. And Michael is still my son, I shot back. My child, whom I chose to love, just as you chose to raise me. Or was that just about protecting your precious reputation? I pulled another document from my bag, this one fresh from my lawyer's office. I'm not just here about the DNA test. I've spent the last month digging through property records, trying to understand why this house always felt so familiar. Grandfather's face went ashen. Elena. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that this mansion wasn't built by Martinez money at all. It was inherited through marriage, specifically through my grandmother's side of the family, the Ramirez side. I spread out the property records, yellowed with age but clear in their implications. Isabella Ramirez wasn't just any maid. She was the granddaughter of the original house staff, whose family had served here for generations. She grew up in the servants' quarters, playing in these halls just like I did. That's why everything feels familiar. This house is in my blood, but not the way you thought. Grandmother sank back onto the settee, her composure finally cracking. How did you find all this? Property records are public, and old servants talk, especially when someone asks the right questions. Maria? I called out, knowing the housekeeper was listening from a hallway. Would you join us, please? Maria entered, her gray hair neat under her cap, her spine straight despite her years. She'd been here as long as I could remember, always watching, always silent. Until now. I knew Isabella, she said quietly, helped raise her after her parents died. Watched her grow up in these halls, and I watched them send her away when she needed us most. You knew. Grandmother's voice was barely a whisper. All these years. We all knew, Maria replied. The whole staff knew. We kept your secrets, protected your lies, but we never forgot. I took Michael's hand, drawing strength from his presence. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over control of the family trust to me, not as your granddaughter, but as Isabella Ramirez's daughter, the rightful heir to both sides of this legacy. And if we refuse, grandfather's attempt at defiance was weakened by the tremor in his voice. Then everything comes out. The pregnancy, the cover-up, the payoff. I wonder how the board of directors would react to learning that their chairman engineered the disappearance of a teenage girl, or that the great Martinez family fortune is built on stolen inheritance and buried secrets. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed the hour, its deep tones reverberating through the heavy silence. Finally, grandfather reached for his pen. What will you do? Grandmother asked as he began signing the papers my lawyer had prepared. With the business, the house, everything. I looked down at Michael, who had been watching the entire scene with quiet dignity. I'm going to build something new, something honest, a legacy that doesn't depend on lies and shame. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and financial transitions. My grandparents retired to their villa in Spain, their carefully constructed world of privilege and pretense crumbling around them. The family business underwent a transformation, with new policies emphasizing transparency and ethical practices. But the real work was personal. With Maria's help and my investigators' contacts, I finally tracked down Isabella Ramirez. She was living in a small town outside Mexico City, teaching at a local school. The woman who opened the door to my knock had my eyes, my smile, and 29 years of pain etched into her face. Elena, she whispered, reaching out to touch my cheek, as if she couldn't believe I was real. Mom, I replied, the word feeling both foreign and deeply right on my tongue. We spent hours talking, crying, sharing the stories of our separated lives. She told me about growing up in this very house, about falling in love with my father despite knowing it was forbidden, about being given an impossible choice. They said you would have a better life without me, she explained, tears rolling down her cheeks. That you would be educated, privileged, protected. I was so young, so scared. I convinced myself they were right. They weren't, I said firmly, holding her hand. No privilege is worth losing your mother. When I introduced her to Michael, she wept again, this time with joy. My grandson, she said in Spanish, gathering him into her arms. Mi nieto precioso. Michael, who had been learning Spanish since I adopted him, replied shyly, Hola, abuela. The Martinez mansion has changed now. The stern portraits of past patriarchs have been replaced with photographs showing the true history of the house, including pictures of the generations of staff who kept it running. The servants' quarters have been converted into a community center, offering education and support to immigrant families. Isabella, my mother, splits her time between Mexico and here, teaching Spanish and sharing stories about the house's history. Michael adores her, soaking up the language and culture that should have been my birthright. Last week, we hosted a family dinner in the formal dining room. But instead of the cold, hierarchical affairs I remember from childhood, this one was warm and loud and real. Maria and the other staff sat with us as equals. My mother's laughter rang through the halls. Michael ran around the table, no longer constrained by rules about proper behavior. Mommy, he asked later that night as I tucked him into bed, are we a normal family now? I thought about our unconventional household, the adopted son, the long-lost mother, the staff-turned-family, all the hidden stories finally brought into the light. No, mio, I replied, kissing his forehead. We're not normal. We're real, and that's much better. The next morning, I found my mother in the library, running her fingers along the same mahogany wainscoting that had always drawn me. I used to do this too, she said, smiling at the memory. The house remembers, even when people try to forget. Did you ever think you'd be back here? I asked, joining her by the window. Never, she admitted. But life has a way of bringing truth to light. Your son taught me that. I raised an eyebrow. How so? Because you chose him with love, just as I chose to have you. The Martinezes never understood that family isn't about blood or status or inheritance. It's about love, about choice, about seeing the truth in each other's hearts. As if summoned by our conversation, Michael appeared in the doorway, proudly carrying a book of Spanish stories Maria had given him. Abuela, he called out, will you read with me? My mother's face lit up with joy. Of course, my amor. Come, sit with us. As I watched them settle onto the window seat, sunlight streaming through the stained glass and casting rainbow patterns across their faces, I finally understood why this house had always called to me. It wasn't just the physical structure that felt familiar. It was the echoes of love, of belonging, of truth that had been buried but never forgotten. The Martinez family legacy didn't end with my revelation. It was reborn, transformed into something stronger and more beautiful than mere bloodlines could create. In the end, the greatest inheritance wasn't the money or the property or the family name. It was the courage to choose love over pretense, truth over tradition, and real family over rigid rules about who belongs and who doesn't. Every Sunday now, we still have family dinners in the big house. But instead of cold silence and careful manners, the rooms ring with laughter, with stories in English and Spanish, with the sound of children running through halls that once echoed only with whispered secrets. And in these moments, I look at my chosen son and my found mother, at the family we've built from the ashes of lies. And I know that some inheritances are worth more than all the Martinez millions combined. They say home is where the heart is. But sometimes, home is also where the truth finally breaks free, where long-buried love resurfaces, and where new stories begin. In the end, that's the only legacy worth passing on. The restaurant business is built on secrets, secret recipes, secret techniques, secret deals made in back rooms over glasses of wine. But the biggest secret in my family's restaurant chain wasn't written in any cookbook. It was the truth about who really created our success. I'm Elena Romano, former executive chef and now ex-COO of Romano's Italian Kitchen, a chain of restaurants my family built from a single neighborhood trattoria into a regional empire. At least that's what the official story says. The truth, like most family stories, is more complicated. It started in my grandmother's kitchen 50 years ago, Nonna Maria didn't just cook food, she created magic. Her tomato sauce was legendary in our Little Italy neighborhood, people lining up around the block just to get a taste. The recipe was her closely guarded secret, passed down from her mother in Naples, or so everyone thought. The reality? Nonna Maria created that sauce recipe herself, experimenting late at night after long days working in other people's restaurants. I know because I was there, perched on a kitchen stool at age 8, watching her add pinches of this and dashes of that, taking careful notes in my little notebook. Remember piccola, she'd say in her thick Italian accent, a recipe is more than ingredients. It's love, it's timing, it's knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them. By the time I was 12, I knew that sauce recipe better than my own name. Nonna Maria made sure of it, teaching me every subtle variation, every seasonal adjustment. My father Thomas, her only son, was too busy with the business side to learn. My brother Marco was more interested in playing restaurant owner than learning to cook. The sauce is the heart of everything, Nonna would tell me. Without it, we're just another Italian restaurant. With it, we're Romano's. She was right. When my father opened the first Romano's Italian kitchen in 1985, it was Nonna's sauce that made us special. As we expanded to more locations, that sauce remained our signature, our secret weapon. Every batch had to be made by either Nonna Maria or, increasingly as she got older, by me. The business grew rapidly through the 1990s and early 2000s. 5 locations became 10, then 15. My father handled the business expansion, Marco glad-handed with investors, and I ran the kitchens, protecting the quality of our food, especially that sauce. Nonna Maria passed away in 2015, leaving me as the only person who knew the complete recipe. All our other chefs had versions of it, but never the whole thing. Key ingredients were pre-mixed at our commissary kitchen. Certain steps were kept deliberately vague in the manual. It was safer that way, Dad always said. Can't risk our secret getting out. What nobody knew was that Nonna had legally transferred ownership of the recipe to me years before she died. The sauce belongs to the cook, she'd said, making me promise to protect it. I filed the paperwork away, never thinking I'd need it. Then Dad had his heart attack. It was sudden, massive, leaving no time for goodbyes or final instructions. One minute he was complaining about the cost of imported olive oil. The next he was gone. The family was devastated, but business doesn't stop for grief. I thought the succession plan was clear. I've been effectively running operations for years, maintaining our quality standards while introducing new menu items that kept us current. The customers loved us. Our profits were strong. Our employees stayed forever. Marco handled marketing and public relations, which suited his personality. But I underestimated my brother's ambition and my mother's blindness when it came to her only son. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for 1 month after Dad's funeral. I spent that time keeping our restaurants running, making sure our customers and employees felt secure despite the change in leadership. Marco spent it lobbying board members and making deals. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, secretive meetings I wasn't invited to, sympathetic looks from longtime employees. But I was grieving, distracted, still believing in family loyalty. The meeting started normally enough. Standard reports, financial updates, moment of silence for Dad. Then Marco stood up to present his vision for the future. Romano's needs to evolve, he announced, pacing the conference room like he was giving a TED talk. We need to think bigger, expand faster. Push into new markets, streamline operations, maximize profitability. I felt a chill as he outlined his plans. Cheaper ingredients to cut food costs. Simplified menu to reduce kitchen complexity. Pre-made sauces from a commercial manufacturer to ensure consistency. But the sauce, I started to protest, is a relic of the past. Marco cut me off smoothly. Charming family history, but not scalable. Modern restaurants need modern solutions. I looked around the room, seeing heads nodding. Even my mother, who'd practically lived on Nana's cooking, seemed convinced. Furthermore, Marco continued, this transition requires strong, pragmatic leadership. Someone who can make tough decisions without being emotionally attached to outdated methods. And there it was, the knife sliding between my ribs with surgical precision. The vote was quick, clinical. Marco as CEO, supported by a new executive team of his choosing. My position as COO would be eliminated, replaced by a streamlined management structure. You'll be taken care of course, Marco said afterward, all fraternal concern. A generous severance package, consulting fees. Maybe you could write a cookbook. I sat there, numb, as he outlined my professional funeral. Mother patted my hand, murmuring about how this was for the best, how I could finally have a life outside the restaurants. They didn't understand. The restaurants were my life. That sauce was my heritage, my connection to Nana Maria, the heart of everything we'd built. I left the meeting in a daze, barely registering the sympathetic glances from employees who'd already heard the news. In my office, I stared at the old photos on the wall, Nana Maria and me in the original kitchen, Dad cutting the ribbon at our 10th location, family celebrations marked by food and laughter. My phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Need you to transfer all recipes and procedures to new corporate chef by Friday, especially the sauce details. Time to pass the torch. That emoji felt like a slap. He thought he'd won, thought he could just take everything our family had built and turn it into another soulless chain restaurant. He'd forgotten one crucial detail, something Nana Maria had taught me long ago in that tiny kitchen. Some secrets are worth keeping. Some recipes belong to the cook. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in years. Inside was a document filed with the patent office the year before Nana died. A legal registration of intellectual property signed by Maria Romano and witnessed by her lawyer. My hands didn't shake as I took a photo of the document and sent it to our family lawyer, Mr. Rossi. His response came within minutes. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't sign anything. Don't give anyone any recipes. I looked around my office at the life I'd helped build, the legacy they wanted to erase. Marco thought he was getting everything. He was about to learn that some things can't be bought, sold, or stolen. Even the best sauce needs time to simmer. Mr. Rossi's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same leather chairs, same photos of Italian landscapes, same faint smell of espresso. But this morning, something was different. Maybe it was the extra people in the room. Along with Mr. Rossi, there was a patent attorney, a restaurant industry consultant, and surprisingly, Tony Martelli, our head of operations who'd been with us since the first location opened. Thank you all for coming, Mr. Rossi began, sliding on his reading glasses. We have an interesting situation here. Interesting was an understatement. Over the next hour, the patent attorney confirmed what Nana Maria had set up years ago. The sauce recipe wasn't just a family secret. It was a registered trade secret, legally assigned to me. The restaurant chain had been licensing it all this time through a separate company Nana had created, with me as the sole owner. Your grandmother was quite clever, the patent attorney said, reviewing the documents. She structured this to protect both the recipe and your position in the company. The licensing agreement requires the sauce to be produced under your direct supervision, using your approved methods. Tony cleared his throat. That explains why she always insisted Elena oversee sauce production, even after we grew to 15 locations. The restaurant consultant, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Chen, had been studying our financial reports. The sauce isn't just your signature item, she said, looking up. It's the foundation of your entire menu. Marinara, vodka sauce, the special Sunday gravy. They all start with this base. Without it, we're just another Italian chain. I finished echoing Nana's words from so long ago. Mr. Rossi leaned forward. Marco has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's planning to announce his new partnership with national food distributors to supply pre-made sauces to all locations. My stomach turned at the thought of our restaurants serving mass-produced sauce from a factory. Can he do that? Not without breaching the licensing agreement, the patent attorney said, which would allow you to withdraw permission to use the recipe at all. That would cripple the business, Tommy warned. Our customers come for that sauce. They can taste the difference. Exactly, Sarah nodded. And here's something else to consider. I've reviewed the expansion plans Marco presented. He's leveraged the company heavily, borrowed against projected growth from 30 new locations in the next 2 years, all based on cutting costs and streamlining operations. I saw where this was going, so if the sauce suddenly wasn't available, the projections would collapse, she confirmed. Along with the financing, we spent the next few hours developing a strategy. By the time I left Mr. Rossi's office, I knew exactly what I had to do. The boardroom was packed the next morning. Marco had brought in his new executive team, all sharp suits and PowerPoint presentations. Mother sat in her usual place, looking uncertain. I noticed she was wearing the necklace Nana Maria had given her on her wedding day. Marco started his presentation with typical flair: growth projections, market penetration strategies, cost-cutting measures. The sauce change was presented as a minor operational detail, barely worth mentioning. And with these new efficiencies, he concluded, we project expanding to 50 locations within 5 years. The Romano's brand will become a national powerhouse. The board members looked impressed. Mother was beaming. Marco shot me a smug smile as he sat down. Any questions? The board chairman asked. Just one. I stood slowly, placing Nana's original recipe book on the table. Has anyone reviewed the licensing agreement for our signature sauce? Marco's smile faltered slightly. That's just a formality. All recipes and processes belong to the corporation. Actually, Mr. Rossi said, entering right on cue, that's not correct. He distributed copies of the licensing agreement to each board member. The sauce recipe is owned by a separate entity controlled by Elena Romano. Its use by Romano's Italian kitchen is subject to specific conditions. The room erupted in confusion. Marco's face turned red as he snatched a copy of the agreement. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. Mother, tell them this can't be right. But Mother was staring at the signature page at Nana Maria's familiar handwriting. She never said, she whispered. Nana understood something you've forgotten, Marco, I said, keeping my voice calm. A restaurant isn't just a business. It's a promise to our customers, a connection to our heritage. That sauce isn't just a recipe, it's our grandmother's legacy. The new executives were whispering urgently to each other, reviewing documents on their tablets. I knew what they were realizing, how dependent their plans were on having access to our signature sauce. The licensing agreement is very specific, Mr. Rossi continued. Any change in sauce production methods or ingredients must be approved by the recipe owner. Furthermore, production must be overseen by Elena Romano personally. We'll challenge it, Marco snapped. Corporate owns all intellectual property. You can try, the patent attorney said, joining us. But during a legal process, which could take years, you would lose the right to use the recipe at all. How do you think that would affect your expansion plans? Sarah Chen stepped forward, presenting her analysis of how losing the sauce would impact the company's projections and financing. The numbers weren't pretty. I watched Marco's face as his perfect plan crumbled. The board members were murmuring, shuffling papers, shooting concerned glances at each other. His new executives looked increasingly uncomfortable. There is another option, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. The restaurants work because we balance tradition and progress. The old and the new. I've spent years modernizing our kitchens, improving efficiency while protecting quality. We can expand, but not by sacrificing what makes us special. I laid out my own plan, measured growth, maintained quality, innovation that enhance rather than replace our traditions. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, saw the board members remembering why our restaurant succeeded in the first place. And the sauce, Marco demanded, stays exactly as Nana created it, made fresh, made right, made with love. That's not negotiable. The board's vote was unanimous. Marco's expansion plan was rejected. His new executives were thanked for their time and dismissed. I was reinstated as COO with expanded responsibilities for maintaining quality across all locations. And my brother? I asked, watching Marco storm out of the room. Will remain as head of marketing, the chairman said, where he can focus on his strengths without overreaching. Mother caught up with me after the meeting, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Elena. I should have seen what was happening. It's okay, Mom, I hugged her. We all miss Dad. We all want to honor his memory. We just had different ideas about how to do it. That evening, I went back to the original restaurant location. The dinner rush was over, but the kitchen was still warm, filled with the familiar scent of simmering sauce. Tony was there, checking inventory like he'd done thousands of times before. Just like old times, he smiled. You know, your grandmother told me this would happen someday. Said Marco had your father's ambition, but not his heart. Said you had her spirit, the soul of a true cook. I opened Nana's recipe book, running my fingers over her handwritten notes. She taught me that a recipe is more than ingredients. Sigh, he grinned. It's love, it's timing. And knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them, I finished. 6 months have passed since that board meeting. Our restaurants are thriving, expanding thoughtfully into carefully chosen locations. Marco has actually proven to be a better marketing director when he's not trying to run everything. His latest campaign about authentic family recipes made with love is our most successful ever. Mother spends more time in the restaurants now, sharing stories about Nana Maria with our staff, teaching them that good food is about more than profit margins. Sometimes I catch her in the kitchen, closing her eyes as she smells the sauce, smiling at memories only she can see. Yesterday, a food critic wrote that Romano's manages something rare in the restaurant industry, growing without losing its soul. He called our sauce a taste of tradition in a modern world. Nana Maria would have liked that review. She always said a good sauce, like a good life, needs the right balance of ingredients. Sweet and sharp, old and new, tradition and innovation, all simmering together to create something special. Last week, I found my old childhood notebook, the one where I carefully recorded Nana's lessons. On the last page, in her handwriting, was a note I'd never noticed before. Remember, piccola, the secret ingredient isn't in the sauce. It's in the heart of the cook. Guard it well. I'm teaching my niece how to make the sauce now. Marco's daughter Sophia, just turned 8, perches on the same kind of kitchen stool I once used, scribbling in her own notebook. She has Nana's eyes, bright and curious, watching everything. Why do we add the basil last? She asked yesterday. Because some things can't be rushed, I told her, stirring the pot slowly. They need time to develop, to become what they're meant to be. She nodded seriously, writing it down. Another generation learning our family's real secret, that the best recipes aren't just about food. They're about love, tradition, and the courage to protect what matters most. Marco stops by sometimes, watching Sophia learn the family legacy he almost destroyed. I see regret in his eyes, but also understanding. He's learning too, in his own way. The sauce still simmers in our kitchens, still brings people back again and again. But now everyone knows why, not because of secret ingredients or clever marketing, but because every batch is made the way Nana taught me, with patience, with pride, and with love. That's one recipe that will never change. The envelope from Riverside Community College felt impossibly light in my hands. Inside was my acceptance letter to their nursing program, not Stanford's medical school where I'd been accepted 3 months ago. But it was something. A way forward. A chance to still help people, even if it wasn't quite the dream I'd planned. You don't have to do this, my brother Michael whispered from his hospital bed. I'll figure something out. Maybe another clinical trial. I shook my head, forcing a smile. It's done, Mikey. I already transferred the money this morning. All $287,000 of my college fund, carefully saved since I was born, meant to fund my medical school dreams, now redirected to pay for my brother's experimental cancer treatment, a treatment our parents had refused to help with, claiming they couldn't afford it. It's too risky, Dad had said, not meeting our eyes. The success rates are too low. We've already spent everything we can. He'll die without it. I'd screamed, waving the doctor's reports at them. This is his last chance. Then maybe it's God's will, Mom had whispered, crossing herself. We have to accept. No, I'd stood up, my hands shaking. I don't accept that. Not when there's still a chance. That was 3 months ago. Now I sat in a hospital watching my little brother sleep, his body finally responding to the treatment I paid for. The treatment that had cost me my future, my parents' love, and any relationship with my family. The day I'd transferred the money, Dad had called me into his home office. The same office where he ran the family's successful construction company, where he taught me about business and responsibility since I was old enough to understand. You're making a mistake, he'd said, his voice cold. That money was for your education. For your future. Michael's life is more important than my future, I'd replied. And what about our family's reputation? Taking money meant for education and gambling it on an experimental treatment? What will people think? I'd stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. Who cares what people think? This is about saving your son. It's about responsibility. He thundered. about respecting your parents' wishes. If you do this, if you throw away your future on this foolish gamble, don't expect any more support from us. No more allowance, no more car insurance, no more living at home. You'll be on your own. Fine, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'd rather be on my own than watch my brother die when I could have helped. Mom had cried, begged me to reconsider. Think about your future, Deanna. Medical school has been your dream since you were 10. Watching my brother die has never been part of that dream, I'd responded, walking out of their house for what I thought would be the last time. Now 3 months later, I was working 2 jobs, waitressing and night shift at a convenience store, while taking prerequisites at community college. My tiny studio apartment barely fit a bed and desk, but it was mine. Paid for with honest work, just like everything else in my new life. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about Michael's progress. The experimental treatment was doing exactly what they'd hoped, shrinking tumors that had been declared inoperable. He even started talking about going back to college himself once he recovered. Our parents hadn't visited him once since I paid for the treatment. Their form of protest, I suppose. Or maybe they couldn't face the evidence that they'd been wrong. Miss Anderson. A nurse poked her head into the room. There's someone here to see you. Says he's your parents' business partner. I frowned. Frank Davidson? She nodded. He's quite insistent. Frank had been Dad's partner in Anderson and Davidson Construction for 20 years. He'd been like an uncle to me and Michael growing up, always bringing us presents from his business trips, attending our school events when our parents were too busy. I found him pacing in the hospital waiting room, looking older and more troubled than I remembered. Diana, he said, pulling me into a quick hug. You look tired, kiddo. Working 2 jobs will do that, I replied. What brings you here, Uncle Frank? He glanced around the waiting room, then pulled me into a quiet corner. There's something you need to see. Something I've been struggling with since I found out what happened with Michael's treatment. He pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. These are financial records from the company, specifically from a special account your father set up 3 months ago. I took the folder, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, investment documents. I don't understand, I said, scanning the numbers. This shows a transfer of $500,000 right around the time Michael needed the treatment, but Dad said they couldn't afford. Keep reading. Frank urged quietly. I flipped through more pages, my confusion growing. These are receipts for a vacation house in the Bahamas, a new yacht. But how could they afford this if they couldn't help Michael? Frank's face was grim. There's more. Check the source of the funds. I turned to the original transfer document and felt my world tilt sideways. The money had come from a trust fund, my trust fund. Not my college fund that I'd donated to Michael's treatment, but a separate account I'd never known existed. Your grandmother left it to you, Frank explained softly. It was supposed to be given to you on your 25th birthday. Your parents were trustees, meant to manage it until then. But they used it to buy themselves luxury items while claiming they couldn't afford to save their own son. My voice cracked. How could they? That's not all, Frank said, pulling out another document. Look at the date they transferred the money. 1 day after you used your college fund for Michael's treatment. Almost like they were punishing me, I finished, feeling sick. They let me sacrifice my future, my dreams, when they had access to money that could have saved Michael without costing me anything. Frank nodded sagely. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. It's not right, Deanna. What they did isn't just morally wrong, it's legally questionable. As trustees, they had a fiduciary duty. My phone buzzed, interrupting him. A text from my mother, coming to see Michael tomorrow. Please don't be there. We need family time with our son. Family time. After 3 months of ignoring him, of letting me work myself to exhaustion trying to build a new life while caring for my brother, they wanted family time. I looked at the documents in my hands, then at Frank's worried face. Uncle Frank, I said slowly, I'm going to need copies of everything. And maybe the name of a good lawyer. He reached into his briefcase again. Already got them right here, kiddo, and I know just the person you should talk to. I hugged the documents to my chest, thinking about all the nights I cried myself to sleep, believing I'd lost my family's love by defying their wishes to save my brother. All the times I doubted my decision while working double shifts on 3 hours of sleep. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. What I would discover about my parents' financial dealings over the next few days would shake our family and their precious reputation to its very foundation. The law office of Patricia Chen specialized in trust litigation. Her corner office overlooked the city skyline, but she barely seemed to notice the view as she reviewed the documents Frank had provided. "This is quite something," she said finally, looking up at me. "Your parents didn't just misappropriate your trust fund. They've been systematically moving money around for years, setting up shell companies, hiding assets." "But why?" I asked. "The construction company is successful. Why would they need to hide money?" Ms. Chen spread out several documents on her desk. "Look at these dates. The first irregular transfers began right after your grandmother passed away. She left significant assets to both you and your brother in trust, with your parents as trustees." My hands shook as I examined the papers. "Michael has a trust fund too." "Had," she corrected grimly. "Your parents emptied it 2 years ago, right around the time his first symptoms appeared. They used a complex series of transfers to make it look like the money was being spent on legitimate medical expenses, but our forensic accountants traced it to personal purchases, vacation properties, luxury cars, private jet memberships." I felt sick. So when they said they couldn't afford his treatment, they had already spent his money on themselves. And when you stepped in with your college fund, they celebrated by spending your trust fund too. "Can we prove all this?" Ms. Chen's smile was sharp. "Oh yes. Your Uncle Frank has been keeping very detailed records since he first noticed discrepancies in the company books. Plus, we have something even better." She pulled out one final document, an email chain between my parents and their private banker, dated the day after I paid for Michael's treatment. "Need to move Dee's trust fund immediately. She's proven herself untrustworthy with money, choosing to waste her education fund on her brother's foolish medical gambles. We'll put the money to better use. Please advise on most discreet transfer methods." The banker's response was professional but clear. "Strongly advise against this course of action. As trustees, you have a legal obligation. Please confirm you understand the potential consequences." My parents' reply, "Just do it. She's made her choice. Now she can live with it." "They put it in writing," Ms. Chen said softly. "Their intent to punish you for helping your brother by stealing your inheritance. In my 20 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case of breach of fiduciary duty." I stared at their words until they blurred through my tears. "What do we do now?" "Now," she began gathering the documents, "now we prepare for tomorrow's family meeting, the one your parents don't know I'll be attending." The next day, I arrived at Michael's hospital room early. He was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than he had in months. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as I set up my laptop. "Once we do this, they need to face what they've done," I said firmly, "to both of us." Frank arrived next, carrying more files. Then Ms. Chen, elegant and imposing in her court attire. We were ready when our parents walked in. Mom stopped short at the sight of us all. "What is this?" We said we wanted family time. "Oh, this is definitely about family," I replied, turning my laptop to face them. "Specifically about how you've been stealing from your children." Dad's face darkened. "How dare you?" "No," I cut him off. "How dare you? How dare you steal Michael's trust fund, spend it on luxuries while he was dying? How dare you punish me for saving him by stealing my inheritance too?" "We did no such thing," Mom protested. "That money was—" "Right here," Frank interrupted, laying out bank statements, every transfer documented, every dollar tracked. "Would you like to explain the shell companies, the hidden accounts, the suspicious timing of certain luxury purchases?" Dad turned on him furiously. "You betrayed us. After 20 years? No, Robert, you betrayed your children. I'm just helping expose the truth." Ms. Chen stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, I'm Patricia Chen, trust litigation attorney. We have clear evidence of breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of trust assets, and potentially criminal financial misconduct. Would you like to discuss this here or in court?" Mom sank into a chair, her face ashen. Dad looked like he might explode. "You ungrateful," he started, but Michael's voice cut through the tension. "Why?" My brother's question was simple but devastating. "Why did you steal my money and let me think I was going to die because treatment was too expensive? Why did you let Diana sacrifice everything to save me when you had the means to help? We were protecting you both. Mom burst out. That experimental treatment, it was a risk. We didn't want you wasting your inheritance on something that might not work. So you spent it on a yacht instead? I asked incredulously. On vacation houses and private jets. We earned that money. Dad shouted. All those years managing your trusts, dealing with investments. As trustees, Ms. Chin interrupted coldly. You were legally and ethically bound to manage those funds for your children's benefit, not your own enrichment. Would you like to see the penalties for this level of breach? She laid out another document, a draft lawsuit with potential damages that made even Dad's face go pale. You have two options, she continued. 1. We take this to court. Every detail becomes public record. Your reputation, your business, your standing in the community, all destroyed. You'll likely face criminal charges for financial fraud. Or, Mom whispered, or you sign these papers now. Return every penny taken from both trusts with interest. Transfer control to an independent trustee. And step down from any involvement in the construction company. You can't do this, Dad protested weakly. The company is my life's work. The company has my name on it too, Frank reminded him, and I have enough documentation of financial irregularities to trigger a full audit. Your choice, Robert. I watched my parents' perfect facade crumble as they realized the depth of their exposure. All their careful deceptions, their manipulations, their cruel power plays, all unraveling in a sterile hospital room while their son watched from his recovery bed. 3 hours later, they left in defeat, having signed everything Ms. Chen put in front of them. The empire they built on stolen trust funds and broken trust was over. What happens now? Michael asked into the heavy silence. Now you focus on getting better, I told him. The trust will be properly managed by an independent trustee. Your treatment is fully funded. And when you're stronger, you can go back to college. What about you? Will you go back to Stanford? I smiled, feeling truly light for the first time in months. Actually, I've been thinking. This whole experience, it's shown me something about myself. About what really matters. I pulled out my Riverside Community College nursing acceptance letter. I still want to help people. But I think I can do that just as well as a nurse. And this way, I can start sooner, work while studying, really understand healthcare from the ground up. Michael reached for my hand. You're amazing, you know that? You gave up everything to save me, and somehow you made it into something positive. Not everything, I corrected him. I gave up money and a specific path, but I gained clarity. Understanding of what real family means, not control and manipulation, but sacrifice and support. Frank cleared his throat. Speaking of support, the company board met this morning. We'd like to offer you a position, Diana, Special Projects Manager, focusing on our healthcare facility construction division. Your perspective as someone who's seen healthcare from the patient advocate side would be invaluable. I stared at him. But I don't have any construction experience. You have something better, he said firmly. Integrity. Compassion. The ability to see what really matters beyond dollar signs and status symbols. That's what we need as we rebuild the company's reputation. 1 year later, Michael is cancer-free and back in college. I'm halfway through my nursing program, working part-time with Frank's company to help design more patient-centered healthcare facilities. Our parents, well, they're living in a modest condo now, all their hidden assets returned to their rightful owners. Yesterday, I received an invitation to a charity gala, my first major public event as part of the company's new leadership team. The theme? Building Hope. Healthcare facilities for the future. I showed it to Michael during his weekly dinner visit to my small but comfortable new apartment. Going to be awkward, he noted. Mom and Dad will probably be there. Lots of their old society friends. Good, I said firmly. Let them see what real success looks like. Not yachts and vacation homes bought with stolen money, but honest work that actually helps people. He smiled. Think they'll ever understand what they did wrong? Maybe not, I admitted. But we do. And that's what matters. I pinned the invitation next to my nursing program acceptance letter. 2 pieces of paper that represented choosing integrity over ease, purpose over status, real family bonds over superficial appearances. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted helps you find what you really need. Sometimes the hardest betrayals lead to the clearest revelations. And sometimes standing up for what's right costs you a false family but builds you a stronger, truer one. Next week, I start my pediatric nursing rotation in the same hospital where Michael received his treatment. Life has a way of coming full circle, showing you that the paths you never planned can lead to exactly where you were meant to be. I may not be heading to Stanford Medical School anymore, but I'm building something better, a life based on truth, integrity, and real purpose. And no trust fund in the world is worth more than that. I'm getting married. My sister Melissa's voice echoed through the phone, high-pitched with excitement. I clutched my coffee mug tighter, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Josh proposed last night at Le Cirque. It was perfect. Down on one knee, champagne, the whole works. Mom's already talking about booking the plaza for next spring. Of course she was. Our mother had been planning Melissa's eventual wedding since she was in kindergarten. The fact that Josh Parker was the groom was just icing on the carefully selected, astronomically expensive cake. Josh Parker, my ex-boyfriend. The man I dated for 2 years in college before he mysteriously broke things off, only to start dating my sister 3 months later. I'm so happy for you both, I lied, watching my reflection in the kitchen window. At 32, I still got carded at bars and mistaken for a college student. Melissa called it my curse. Being the pretty sister while she was the smart one. As if you couldn't be both. So about the wedding, Melissa continued, her tone shifting slightly. I've been thinking about the bridal party. Here it comes, I thought. I just don't think it would be appropriate for you to be a bridesmaid, Sophie. Even though I'd expected it, the words still stung. Oh? It's just, you know how you are. How you affect things. Every time we go anywhere together, all eyes are on you. I can't have that at my wedding. This is my day. I thought about pointing out that I'd never tried to steal her spotlight, that I dressed conservatively, wore minimal makeup, and generally did everything possible to fade into the background at family events. But what was the point? This narrative had been set in stone since we were children. I understand, I said quietly. Don't be dramatic, Sophie. You can still come to the wedding, of course. Just not as part of the bridal party. And maybe wear something muted. Navy or brown would be good. I made non-committal noises until she hung up, then sat at my kitchen counter, staring at nothing. My cat, Oscar, jumped up and head-butted my arm, demanding attention. At least you love me regardless of how I look, I murmured, scratching behind his ears. The next few months were a blur of wedding preparations that I watched from the sidelines. Mom called daily with updates, mostly to tell me what I shouldn't wear or do at the ceremony. No bright colors, she insisted. And maybe you could cut your hair. Something less attention-grabbing. I looked at my perfectly normal shoulder-length brown hair in the mirror and wondered, not for the first time, if my entire family was slightly insane. The real bombshell dropped 6 weeks before the wedding. I was grading papers. I taught English at the local high school when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You need to see this. Your sister isn't who you think she is. Attached were screenshots of text messages between Melissa and Josh, recent ones, very explicit ones. The problem? They were from 2 years ago, when Josh was still dating me. My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message. The timestamps didn't lie. While I was planning our future together, Josh had been sleeping with my sister. Their relationship hadn't started after we broke up. It had been the reason we broke up. More texts followed from the anonymous number, pictures of them together at a hotel, date stamp receipts, email exchanges. Someone had compiled a thorough record of their betrayal. Who is this? I typed back. Josh's ex before you. Found all this while cleaning out old hard drives. Thought you deserved to know. I sat there for a long time, Oscar purring in my lap, looking at the evidence of my sister's betrayal. Not just the affair, but the years of lies that followed. The family dinners where they'd played the perfect couple while I nursed my broken heart. The sympathetic looks from relatives who thought I just couldn't keep a man while my brilliant sister had landed him. The next day, I got a call from my mother. Sophie, darling, about the wedding. Melissa's having second thoughts about inviting you at all. I clutched the phone tighter. What? Well, she's worried you might make a scene. You've been acting strange lately, distant. And you know how you can get emotional. I thought about the screenshots sitting in my phone. About years of being gaslit and marginalized by my own family. about the perfect wedding being planned for my sister and the man she'd stolen from me. "Don't worry, Mom," I said calmly. "I promise I won't do anything to ruin Melissa's perfect day." I spent the next few weeks quietly preparing. I didn't protest when the wedding invitation was rescinded. Didn't argue when Melissa told mutual friends I was too jealous of her happiness to attend. I just smiled and focused on my work and adopted another cat, a beautiful white Persian I named Lady. But every night, after my students' papers were graded and my cats were fed, I worked on my plan. I had evidence of a years-long deception. The question was, what would hurt more, revealing it before the wedding and stopping the ceremony, or waiting until after they'd said their vows? The answer came 3 days before the wedding, at what should have been the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited, of course, but the screenshots from that evening found their way to my phone anyway. Melissa, radiant in a designer dress, toasting her perfect love story. Josh, handsome in his tuxedo, describing how he'd known she was the one from the moment they met, conveniently leaving out that he'd been dating her sister at the time. And then the final straw, my mother's speech about how Melissa and Josh were meant to be and how wonderful it was that they found each other at the right time. I looked at my cats, curled up together on my couch, then at the stack of evidence on my coffee table. "What do you think?" I asked them, before or after. Oscar yawned. Lady blinked her blue eyes lazily. I picked up my phone and started making calls. If I was going to crash a wedding, I was going to do it right. 2 days before the ceremony, I visited my favorite salon. Not for a dowdy haircut as my mother had suggested, but for subtle highlights that made my brown hair shimmer gold in the light. I booked a spa day, had my nails done, and went shopping. The dress I chose wasn't navy or brown. It was a deep, rich burgundy that made my skin glow and my green eyes pop. Not white. I wasn't that tacky, but absolutely guaranteed to draw attention. "You can't avoid photographs in this," the boutique owner warned me. I smiled, thinking of the photos and screenshots carefully organized on my iPad. That's rather the point. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. I took extra care with my appearance. Elegant makeup that enhanced rather than concealed, hair styled in soft waves. The burgundy dress fitting perfectly. My hands should have been shaking as I drove to the plaza. My heart should have been racing as I walked through the lobby. Instead, I felt oddly calm. Years of being the family scapegoat, the pretty face without a brain, the emotional one who couldn't be trusted not to make a scene. It all led to this moment. I checked my reflection one last time in a gilded mirror. Ready or not, I whispered to myself, "Here comes the truth." The security guard at the ballroom door started to stop me. My name had been removed from the guest list. But then my mother's personal assistant spotted me. "Sophie." Janet's eyes widened at my appearance. "You're not supposed to be." "I know," I said smoothly, "but I have something important to contribute to the ceremony. You might want to find a good seat." She started to protest, but I was already moving past her into the ballroom. Heads turned as I walked down the aisle, whispers following in my wake. I caught a glimpse of my mother's horrified face, of Josh's sudden pallor, of Melissa's fury as she spotted me from the bridal preparation room door. I took a seat in the front row, directly opposite where my parents would sit, and waited. The truth, like my burgundy dress, was about to make quite an entrance. Part 2. The wedding planner tried to approach me twice, no doubt to ask me to leave, but something in my calm demeanor seemed to unsettle her. My mother was frantically whispering with my father near the entrance, shooting worried glances in my direction. I smiled serenely and opened my clutch, checking that my iPad was ready. The string quartet began playing right on schedule. Guests settled into their seats, the excited murmur of conversation filling the ornate ballroom. I could hear snippets of whispered speculation about my presence, about my dress, about what drama might unfold. Josh appeared at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo but noticeably pale. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw the flash of fear cross his face. He knew me well enough to know I wouldn't be here without a reason. The bridesmaids processed in wearing the pale pink dresses Melissa had chosen. I recognized most of them, college friends, cousins, and our youngest sister Amy, who'd been deemed plain enough to be included in the bridal party. Amy caught my eye as she passed, giving me a slight nod. She at least had always seen through Melissa's manipulations. Then the music changed to the bridal march and everyone stood. Melissa appeared in the doorway on our father's arm, resplendent in a custom Vera wine gown that probably cost more than my yearly salary. She looked beautiful, I had to admit, right up until she spotted me and her face contorted with barely concealed rage. I remained seated as she passed, earning more whispers from the crowd. Let them whisper. They'd be doing much more than that soon enough. The ceremony began traditionally enough. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about honesty and trust. Each word seemed to hang in the air like an accusation. When he reached the familiar "speak now or forever hold your peace" line, I saw my mother tense, probably expecting me to jump up with some emotional outburst. But I waited. This wasn't the moment. Melissa and Josh exchanged their vows. Beautiful, heartfelt promises of faithfulness and devotion that made me want to laugh at the irony. They exchanged rings. They were pronounced husband and wife. It was only after their first kiss as a married couple, as they turned to face their guests with triumphant smiles, that I stood up. "I'd like to offer my congratulations," I said clearly, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. "And I have a special presentation for the happy couple." Before anyone could stop me, I pulled out my iPad and connected it to the ballroom's professional AV system. Courtesy of a very helpful tech I'd befriended during my preparation, the giant screens meant for displaying wedding photos flickered to life. "Sophie, don't you dare," Melissa started, but it was too late. The first screenshot appeared. A text conversation between her and Josh from exactly 3 years ago. The timestamp was clearly visible. "Josh, miss you already. Last night was amazing, Melissa. We have to be careful. Sophie suspects something. Josh, I'll break up with her soon. Just need to find the right moment. Melissa, make it believable. We can't start dating too quickly after." The crowd gasped. I clicked to the next image. Photos of them together at a hotel, dated 2 weeks before Josh broke up with me. Then email exchanges. Hotel receipts. A 2-year trail of deception laid bare. Since the bride and groom chose to rewrite their love story, I said into the shocked silence, I thought everyone should know the original version. How they really found each other, while Josh was still dating me. Chaos erupted. Melissa was screaming something about security, but her voice was drowned out by the reactions of their guests. Josh's parents, who had never quite warmed to Melissa, were on their feet demanding explanations. My mother had collapsed into her chair, while my father stood frozen, staring at the evidence of his favorite daughter's betrayal. "You crazy bitch," Melissa shrieked, starting toward me with her bouquet raised like a weapon. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous." "Jealous?" I laughed, and the sound carried clearly through the stunned ballroom. "Of what?" "Your affair with my boyfriend. Your need to lie and manipulate to get what you want. The way you've made our entire family complicit in your deception." "It wasn't like that," Josh tried to interject, but I turned to him with a cold smile. "No. Should we show everyone the messages where you told me you needed space to find yourself, while you were actually finding your way into my sister's bed? Or maybe the ones where you two laughed about how stupid I was for not figuring it out sooner?" More screenshots appeared on the screens. The truth in black and white, impossible to deny or explain away. I've spent years being told I'm too pretty, too emotional, too much of a threat to Melissa's happiness. I continued, addressing the shocked guests. I've been excluded from family events, asked to make myself less noticeable, even uninvited from this wedding, all to protect her ego. Meanwhile, she and Josh have been living a lie, making me the fool in a perfect love story. Amy had moved to stand beside me, her bridesmaid's bouquet discarded. "It's all true," she added quietly. "I caught them once before Sophie found out. Melissa threatened to ruin my college applications if I told anyone." The wedding planner was frantically trying to restore order, but it was too late. The perfect facade had cracked, and the ugly truth was spilling out for everyone to see. Our mother finally found her voice. "Sophie, how could you? This was your sister's special day. How could I?" I turned to her, feeling years of suppressed anger rising. "How could you, Mom? You knew, didn't you? About the affair, about all of it. That's why you've spent years trying to minimize me, to make me less of a threat. It was never about me being too pretty. It was about protecting your perfect daughter's perfect lie." Her silence was all the confirmation the guests needed. Melissa had stopped screaming and was now crying dramatically, her expensive makeup running down her face. Josh stood awkwardly beside her, looking like he wanted to disappear. Their perfect wedding had transformed into a public exposure of their true characters, and there was no going back. I gathered my things calmly, enjoying the irony that I was the most composed person in the room. "I'll leave you to enjoy your reception," I said sweetly. "I'm sure you have a lot to discuss. Oh, and Josh, the next time you decide to cheat on someone, you might want to delete your evidence more carefully." As I walked out of the ballroom, head held high in my attention-grabbing burgundy dress, I heard the chaos escalate behind me. Accusations, explanations, recriminations, the soundtrack of a carefully constructed lie finally falling apart. Amy caught up with me at the elevator. "That was magnificent," she said, grinning as she kicked off her bridesmaid shoes. "Want to get a drink?" "I thought you'd never ask." We ended up at a small bar a few blocks from the plaza, still in our wedding finery, sharing a bottle of champagne and years of pent-up stories about Melissa's manipulations. Emmy had seen through it all but had been too young and powerless to do anything about it. Now, at 25, she was finally free to speak her truth too. "What happened with the wedding gift you bought them?" she asked, signaling for another bottle. I smiled. "I donated it to a domestic violence shelter. Seemed more appropriate than letting them enjoy it." The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Melissa and Josh still got married. They could hardly back out after the very public exposure, but their perfect dream wedding was forever tainted by the truth. Many guests left before the reception, including Josh's parents, who were overheard saying they'd always known something wasn't right about how their son and Melissa got together. My mother didn't speak to me for 6 months, though I couldn't say I missed her attempts to dim my light. My father, surprisingly, reached out after a few weeks. We met for coffee, and he apologized for years of enabling Melissa's behavior. "I always knew you were strong," he said, stirring his coffee absently. "But I never realized how strong until today. I'm sorry we made you feel like that was something to be ashamed of." Melissa and Josh moved to Boston shortly after the wedding, unable to face the whispers and changed perceptions in our social circle. Last I heard, she was pregnant with their first child and still telling anyone who would listen that I made everything up out of jealousy. But the screenshots don't lie, and several wedding guests had recorded my presentation. The truth has a way of living on, especially in the digital age. Emmy moved in with me temporarily after the wedding, finally breaking free from our mother's manipulative influence. We'd adopted a third cat, a scrappy rescue we named Truth, and started building the kind of honest, supportive relationship sisters should have. As for me, I'm still teaching English, still getting carded at bars, and still refusing to dim my light for anyone. My students sometimes ask why I smile when they're reading The Picture of Dorian Gray or studying themes of appearance versus reality in literature. If they only knew. Last week, I received an invitation to my cousin Kate's wedding. The note attached read, "Please wear whatever you want, the brighter the better." Some of us have learned from Melissa's mistake. I'm thinking of wearing red. I always knew Nathan resented me. Growing up, he was the golden child of the family. Straight A's, perfect SAT scores, acceptance to all the top colleges. I was the quiet one, the tinkerer who spent weekends in my garage workshop instead of attending the family gatherings where everyone fawned over Nathan's latest achievements. "Why can't you be more like your cousin?" my parents would ask. "Nathan's already interning at Goldman Sachs, and you're still playing with computers." What they didn't understand was that I wasn't playing. I was building, creating, innovating. By 17, I developed my first machine learning algorithm. By 22, I had 3 patents pending. But in our family, nothing could compete with Nathan's traditional path to success. Until now. The email from the patent office sat open on my laptop, confirming that my latest innovation, a revolutionary AI-driven security system, was officially protected. After 5 years of work, countless sleepless nights, and every penny of my savings, I was finally ready to launch SecureFlow Technologies. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Heard about your little startup. Cute. Want to grab coffee? Maybe I can give you some business advice." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the delete button. Nathan had been working at a major tech investment firm for the past 3 years, and he never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of his expertise in the industry. But maybe this was his way of extending an olive branch. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. The coffee shop was crowded when I arrived, but I spotted Nathan immediately. He always dressed like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. Perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. Alex, he stood up, gesturing expansively. Look at you all grown up and starting a company. Dad mentioned something about security software. I slid into the chair across from him, clutching my laptop bag protectively. It's a bit more than that. Secure Flow is an AI-driven system that can predict and prevent security breaches before they happen. The algorithm learns from, yes, he cut me off, waving his hand dismissively. Very interesting. But Alex, be realistic. The security software market is dominated by major players. What makes you think a small startup could compete? I pulled out my laptop, turning it to show him the prototype interface, because none of them have this. Look at the response time, the learning capability, the way it adapts to new threats in real time. For a moment, something flashed across Nathan's face, surprise, interest, before his expression settled back into its usual condescending smile. Impressive for a hobby project, he said, taking a sip of his coffee, but scaling something like this would take serious capital. Have you even thought about funding, market strategy, distribution channels? Actually, yes. I pulled out my business plan, the one I'd spent months perfecting. I've already had preliminary discussions with several venture capital firms. The early feedback has been very positive. Nathan's smile tightened slightly. Oh, anyone I might know? Quantum Ventures expressed interest, and Innovation Partners. Innovation Partners. Nathan sat up straighter. Marshall Davis's firm? I nodded, trying not to show my satisfaction at his reaction. Marshall Davis was a legend in the tech investment world, and though Nathan didn't know it yet, he was scheduled to see my full presentation next week. Look, Alex, Nathan leaned forward, his voice taking on what he probably thought was a kindly tone. Why don't you let me help? My firm specializes in emerging tech. We could acquire Secure Flow, develop it properly. You get a nice payout, maybe a consulting position. I'm not looking to sell, I said firmly. This is my company, my vision. Don't be naive, he scoffed. You really think you can run a tech company? You don't have the experience, the connections. I have the technology, I countered. Everything else can be learned. Nathan sat back, studying me with narrowed eyes. At least let me see the full technical documentation. Maybe I can offer some suggestions before you embarrass yourself in front of serious investors. The technical details are confidential, I said, closing my laptop. But thanks for the coffee. As I stood to leave, Nathan called after me. You're making a mistake, Alex. You're not cut out for this world. Stick to small projects in your garage where you can't get hurt. I should have listened to my instincts, should have recognized the dangerous glint in his eyes. But I was too focused on my upcoming meetings, too busy preparing for Secure Flow's launch. 1 week later, everything fell apart. The email from Innovation Partners arrived at 3 a.m. due to concerns about the originality and ownership of your core technology. We are canceling tomorrow's meeting. Evidence has been presented suggesting that Secure Flow's key innovations may be derived from existing patents. My hands shook as I opened the attached document, a detailed technical analysis comparing Secure Flow's architecture to a supposedly pre-existing system. A system that had been filed for patent protection just 2 days ago, by a company where Nathan was a senior investment manager. I spent the next hour frantically checking other patent filings, my heart sinking with each discovery. Somehow, someone had accessed my technical documentation and filed patents for similar systems across multiple jurisdictions. Secure Flow's unique innovations were now buried under a web of competing claims. My phone started ringing. Other investors canceling meetings, partners pulling out of agreements, potential clients distancing themselves from the controversy. Then came Nathan's text. Try to warn you, cousin. This is a big boy's game. Better luck next time. I sat in my dark office, surrounded by 5 years of work that had been stolen in a matter of days, and felt something inside me break. Not in despair, but in anger. Because Nathan had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I'd kept all my technical documentation in standard files, the kind his corporate hackers could easily access. He didn't know about my real development servers, the ones with timestamp commits going back years. He didn't know about the blockchain records I created, proving the evolution of my work long before his company's suspicious patent filings. And he definitely didn't know about the backup drive I'd given to Marshall Davis personally 3 months ago. long before I ever mentioned innovation partners to Nathan. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been saving for an emergency. Marshall? It's Alex Chen. Remember that situation we discussed? The one you said might come up with certain aggressive competitors? It's happening, and I can prove it. Marshall's response was immediate. Send me everything. And Alex, the invitation to present at next week's industry showcase still stands. I think you'll find the audience very interested in what you have to share. I smiled grimly as I began gathering my evidence. Nathan thought he was playing a game of corporate theft. He was about to learn he'd walked into a trap, one that would expose not just this betrayal, but years of similar schemes his firm had perpetrated against other startups. Little did he know, his perfect reputation was about to crumble in front of the entire tech industry, and this time, everyone would be paying attention to the quiet cousin who worked in their garage. The Silicon Valley Tech Showcase was the industry's most prestigious annual event. CEOs, venture capitalists, and tech journalists packed the convention center, all eager to spot the next big innovation. I stood backstage, watching Nathan prepare for his presentation. He looked perfectly confident, of course. Why wouldn't he be? He thought he'd stolen my technology, buried my startup under fraudulent patent claims, and was about to present his company's groundbreaking security system to the tech world's elite. What he didn't know was that Marshall Davis had spent the past week building an airtight case against him and his firm. Every stolen innovation, every buried startup, every scheme they used to rob entrepreneurs of their work, all documented and verified. My phone buzzed with a text from Marshall. Ready when you are. Legal team standing by. I took a deep breath, thinking about all the times Nathan had belittled my work, all the family gatherings where he dismissed my achievements. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice, not just for me, but for every innovator his firm had crushed. Nathan stepped onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. The giant screens behind him lit up with his company's logo as he launched into his well-rehearsed pitch. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, smooth as ever. Today we're unveiling a revolutionary advancement in cybersecurity. Our AI-driven system can predict and prevent security breaches before they happen. I watched the audience lean forward, captivated by his presentation. Nathan had always been good at this part, the show, the performance, the perfect corporate pitch. The core of our innovation lies in our proprietary machine learning algorithm. He continued, bringing up technical diagrams that I knew intimately, because I created them. Our team has developed a unique approach to threat detection. That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the curtain, laptop in hand. Interesting algorithm, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. Would you mind explaining how the neural network architecture handles adaptive threat response? Nathan's perfect smile faltered for just a moment. That's proprietary information. Really? I connected my laptop to the presentation system, and new windows appeared on the giant screens. Because I can explain it perfectly. After all, I wrote it. The audience murmured as my development logs appeared. Years of work, thousands of commits, all timestamped and blockchain verified. You see, I continued, advancing through the displays. What's fascinating about this proprietary system is that its entire development history exists on my servers. Every iteration, every improvement, every breakthrough, all documented years before your company's suspicious patent filings last week. Nathan's face had gone pale. Alex, this isn't the place. Oh, I think this is exactly the place. I turned to the audience. My name is Alex Chen. That revolutionary security system, it's called Secure Flow. It's my creation, developed over 5 years, with 3 legitimate patents granted last month. What you're seeing today is corporate theft on a massive scale. The room erupted in chaos. Journalists were furiously taking notes, investors were whispering among themselves, and security personnel were moving toward the stage. But I wasn't done. Marshall? I called out, would you like to share what your investigation uncovered? Marshall Davis stood up in the front row. My firm has documented 17 similar cases in the past 3 years. Promising startups approached by Nathan's firm, their intellectual property mysteriously appearing in competitor patents days later. A pattern of systematic theft that ends today. Nathan lunged for the microphone. These are baseless accusations. We have legal documentation. Fraudulent documentation. I cut in, bringing up more displays. Would you like to explain why your patent applications contain direct copies of my source code comments, including the Star Wars references I used to label my functions? A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Nathan's face had moved from pale to ashen. Or perhaps, I continued, you'd like to explain this email chain from last week, where you instructed your tech team to scrub the metadata from stolen files? The same email chain you accidentally sent to my cloud backup address because it was listed in the copy documentation. You're making a huge mistake, Nathan hissed. But his perfect composure had cracked completely. Our lawyers will already be quite busy, Marshall interrupted, standing up. The SEC has been notified and the Patent Office is reviewing all applications from your firm for the past 5 years. But please continue threatening your cousin. I'm sure that will help your case. Security had reached the stage now, but they weren't approaching me. Instead, they moved toward Nathan as several official-looking individuals entered the auditorium. Mr. Reynolds? One of them called out. SEC Enforcement Division. We need you to come with us. What happened next would be talked about in tech circles for years. Nathan, the perfect corporate success story, having a complete meltdown on stage, screaming about family loyalty, about how I'd always been jealous of his success, about how someone like me didn't deserve to succeed in his industry. I gave you a chance, he shouted as security led him away. I offered to buy you out. You could have walked away with something, but now you'll have nothing. Our family will never forgive you for this. I stepped up to the microphone one last time. Actually, Nathan, I'm walking away with everything. My company, my technology, my integrity. And our family? I pulled up one final email on the screen, a group message from our relatives expressing their horror at discovering Nathan's schemes. They're learning the truth about both of us. The aftermath was both better and worse than I'd expected. Nathan's firm imploded as investigations revealed the full scope of their intellectual property theft. Several executives faced criminal charges, and dozens of startups came forward with similar stories of betrayal. SecureFlow's legitimate patents were confirmed, and the technology was recognized as genuinely innovative. Investment offers poured in, but I chose to partner with Marshall's firm, maintaining control while gaining the support I needed to grow. The family fallout was intense. Nathan's parents refused to speak to anyone for months. My parents, finally confronted with evidence they couldn't ignore, struggled to reconcile their image of their perfect nephew with the reality of his actions. But others surprised me. Cousins I'd barely spoken to reach out to apologize for years of dismissing my work. Aunts and uncles who'd always praised Nathan's corporate success now asked about my technology with genuine interest. Last week, at the first family gathering I'd attended since the showcase, my Uncle James, Nathan's father, approached me quietly. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice rough. All those years we thought Nathan's path was the only right way to succeed. We never understood what you were building, never took the time to see your brilliance. It's not about brilliance, I told him. It's about integrity, about creating something real instead of stealing from others. He nodded slowly. Nathan lost sight of that somewhere. Got so caught up in appearing successful that he forgot about being worthy of success. That conversation sparked a larger one within the family about values, about different paths to achievement, about supporting each other's genuine efforts instead of just chasing status. Yesterday, I received an unexpected delivery at my office. Now a proper corporate headquarters instead of a garage workshop. It was my old robotics kit from high school, the one I'd used to build my first prototype. The note attached read, "Found this in the attic. Thought it belonged with someone who knows how to build something real. Love, Mom and Dad." I placed it on my desk, next to the framed copy of SecureFlow's legitimate patents and a recent magazine cover featuring our technology. A reminder that success isn't about following someone else's path or meeting others' expectations. It's about staying true to your vision, protecting your integrity, and sometimes standing up to those who would steal what you've built, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. Nathan's trial starts next month. Some relatives think I should show mercy, ask for leniency. But real family loyalty isn't about protecting wrongdoing. It's about upholding principles that make us worthy of being called a family. Besides, as I told the SEC investigators, the evidence speaks for itself. Just like my code, my comments, my years of documented work. In the end, that's what matters in both technology and life. Not the story you tell about who you are, but the proof of what you've actually built. I'm busy building something new now, expanding Secure Flow's capabilities into exciting areas. And this time, when I present at the Tech Showcase next month, I won't be watching from backstage. I'll be center stage, sharing innovations that are truly mine, surrounded by people who value creation over theft, substance over appearance, and genuine achievement over stolen glory. Sometimes the quietest person in the family has the loudest truth to tell. It just takes the right moment and the right evidence to make everyone listen.